Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had these Elton John tickets for months, my mother screamed, her voice crackling through the video call like a fire in a dry forest. I sat there in stunned silence, clutching my phone with trembling hands. It was Christmas Eve. I was in a hospital room at Las Vegas Medical Center, writhing in pain with my 2-year-old twins, Ethan and Emily, quietly stacking blocks in the corner. A kind nurse named Valerie hovered near me, checking vitals and monitoring the IV drip attached to my arm. But nothing hurt more than the look on my mother's face. Bored, irritated, indifferent. My name is Natasha Wilson, I wanted to say aloud, like some kind of testimony. I'm 33 years old, and I'm the invisible daughter in my own family. My younger sister, Jessica, the golden child, could do no wrong. Ever. Meanwhile, I couldn't even get my parents to watch their only grandchildren while I went into emergency surgery. I was bleeding internally, complications from months of suppressed stress and grief after losing my husband James in a tragic car accident. The doctors were clear. This couldn't wait. But all my parents could talk about was their concert tickets, and how they were celebrating Christmas Eve with Jessica. I have no one else to call, I told them, swallowing my pride. My dad's reply, "You're becoming a real burden, Natasha. We're retired now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without your constant drama." That one hurt worse than the pain slicing through my abdomen. I'd been sending them $2,500 a month ever since they took early retirement 3 years ago. That money helped with their mortgage, their bills, their luxury vacations. Even after James died, I kept sending it, out of loyalty, out of a warped sense of duty. I thought that's what family did. Turns out I was just a paycheck to them. As tears rolled silently down my cheeks, Valerie placed a warm hand on my shoulder. "Hey, I have a friend, Olivia. She's a professional nanny, works with kids who've experienced trauma. I can call her for you." Her kindness hit me like a wave. I nodded, unable to speak. The twins were still so small. They'd already lost their father. I couldn't stand the thought of them waking up without me too. But the bigger fear? Leaving them with people who saw them as a burden. "Yes," I whispered, "please call her." And in that moment, hooked up to machines, doubled over in pain, I began cutting the toxic ties that had strangled me for too long. I wasn't just asking for help anymore. I was reclaiming my life. The nurse left the room to make the call, and I sat back against the stiff hospital pillows, memories crashing over me like waves. When I graduated college with honours, my parents didn't show up. Jessica had a callback for a local toothpaste commercial that same weekend, and that was obviously more important. When I married James, they griped about the venue being too far from their house. When the twins were born, one visit, 30 minutes. The babies were too fussy, my mum said with a grimace. James had always been the one who grounded me. He came from his own messy family and understood the ache of being let down by people who were supposed to love you. "We'll build our own family," he used to say. "One that actually knows how to love." And we did, until the day a drunk driver ran a red light and shattered everything. Since then, I'd been doing my best, raising 2 toddlers, working from home as a freelance graphic designer, trying to hold it all together through the grief and exhaustion. And still, I kept sending the monthly check to my parents. Why? Because I thought maybe that's how you earned love. By giving, by sacrificing, by over-functioning until you broke. But now, broken and bleeding, I saw the truth. They never valued me. They valued what I gave them. Valerie returned with a small smile. "Olivia's on her way, should be here in under an hour. She's great with kids, used to work at the children's hospital." I exhaled in relief. "How much will she cost?" Valerie shook her head. "Don't worry about that right now. Let's focus on getting you prepped for surgery." But I was worried. James's life insurance had loopholes, and the medical bills were already stacking up like bricks on my chest. That $2,500 I was scheduled to send next week, that could pay for childcare, groceries, diapers. The thought lit something in me I hadn't felt in years. Anger, yes, but more than that. Self-preservation. When Olivia arrived, I was instantly at ease. She was warm, composed, with an aura that made even my restless toddlers feel safe. Emily climbed into her lap within 5 minutes. Ethan handed her his favourite truck. I watched them from my hospital bed and felt something crack open inside me. "Could you bring me my phone?" I asked Valerie, my voice shaky. She handed it over. I took a breath, then I sent 2 messages. The first was to my bank. Cancel all future automatic transfers to Robert and Diana Wilson's account. The second was to my parents. Effective immediately, I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Please do not contact me again. As the surgical team rolled me down the hallway, I felt the fear still clawing at me, but underneath that, something else. Something fierce. Freedom. The surgery went well. Better than expected, actually. But recovery hit me harder than I'd anticipated. I spent 5 days in the hospital, drifting in and out of sleep, my body sore and stitched together, but alive. Olivia stayed with the twins the entire time. During the day, she brought them to visit me in the hospital room, reading them books, feeding them snacks. At night, she took them back to my apartment so they could sleep in their own beds. Every time I opened my eyes and saw her gently wiping Ethan's nose or helping Emily find her stuffed giraffe, I felt a mixture of gratitude and grief. Grateful that someone stepped in. Grieving that it wasn't my parents. One afternoon, when I was more lucid, I noticed my phone lighting up beside me. 27 missed calls. Dozens of texts. My heart sank, all from my parents and Jessica. The messages followed a familiar script. Confusion, indignation, and finally, thinly veiled panic. "We don't understand why you're being so cold. After everything we've done for you, you can't just cut us off, Natasha. We have a cruise next month. The tickets are non-refundable." Not a single word about the surgery. Not one message asking how I was, or if the twins were okay. And then came a text from Jessica. Hers felt different. "Mom and Dad told me you were having some minor procedure. Why are they freaking out about money? What's going on?" It hit me then. They lied to her. Of course they did. They downplayed my emergency so they wouldn't have to explain why they'd chosen a concert over their grandkids. Still foggy from pain meds, I texted Jessica the truth. Everything. I even sent her a photo of the twins in the hospital room, Olivia sitting between them while I lay pale and groggy in bed. Her reply was immediate. "Oh my God, Natasha, I had no idea. They told me you were just being dramatic. If I'd known it was emergency surgery, I would have dropped everything to help. I'm so sorry." And I believed her. Jessica wasn't cruel. She was raised in a family where she'd been conditioned to center her own needs, always assuming others were being too sensitive or difficult. Maybe now she was finally seeing the truth. By the time I was discharged, I had made a few important decisions. First, I officially hired Olivia part-time to help with the twins while I healed. Second, I contacted a lawyer and started drafting a will. Something James and I had always talked about, but never finalized. I named a close friend as guardian for the twins. Not my parents, not even Jessica. I couldn't risk it, not yet. And third, I blocked my parents' numbers. I allowed Jessica to stay in touch, cautiously. Her sincerity seemed real, but I needed time. Financially, the decision to cut off my parents was monumental. That $2,500 a month, nearly a third of my income. But it was also the thing holding me hostage. Without it, I could finally afford proper childcare, restock the emergency fund that had evaporated after James died, and maybe, take a breath without drowning in guilt. The first night back in my apartment, I tucked Ethan and Emily into bed, then sat on the edge of my mattress, completely overwhelmed. There was guilt. I'd been trained to feel it. Fear, too, of the future, of managing recovery with 2 toddlers. But there was also something new. Self-respect. My phone buzzed again. Jessica. I had a huge fight with Mom and Dad. They still don't get it. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. Can we talk tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long moment, then replied, yes. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. 2 weeks later, I was getting stronger. I still had pain when I moved too fast or picked up a twin the wrong way, but I was managing. Olivia arrived each morning with a calm, grounding energy that felt like balm on an open wound. I worked part-time, mostly from my laptop in the living room, while she kept the kids entertained. Jessica visited a couple times that week. She brought home-cooked meals, healthy stuff, not casseroles drowned in cheese, and genuinely played with the twins. Our conversations were awkward at first, but honest. Eventually, she opened up. They always made it seem like you were the one pulling away, she admitted one evening, watching Ethan race toy cars across the floor. I thought you just didn't want to be around the family. I didn't realize they were pushing you out. I nodded, saying nothing. There were no words to explain years of being invisible while your sibling was center stage. And just when things started feeling somewhat normal again, it happened. A knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw them. My parents. My mom holding her purse like a shield. My dad's arms folded, mouth tight with impatience. My stomach dropped. Still, I opened the door a crack. Just enough to speak. What do you want? My mother leaned in, her voice syrupy sweet. We've been so worried, darling. You stopped answering our calls. We needed to make sure you and the twins were okay. We're fine, I said flatly. Now, if that's all— It's not all, my dad interrupted, trying to wedge the door open a little more. We need to talk about this ridiculous financial stunt. The bank called us. We had to dip into our cruise fund to make the mortgage payment. I almost laughed in his face. No concern about my surgery. No questions about his grandkids. Just the money. I told you, I said. I'm done sending you anything. But, sweetie, my mom pleaded, her voice rising. We've built our lives around that money. Your father and I made decisions based on your commitment. Commitment? I repeated, stunned. You mean guilt, obligation, manipulation? Her face froze. I've supported you financially for 3 years, while grieving my husband, while raising 2 toddlers, while barely staying afloat. And when I asked for the smallest help, watching your grandkids for one night, you said no, because of Elton John tickets. My father's face darkened. That's not fair. We made one mistake. This isn't punishment, I said quietly. This is consequence. At that moment, Emily toddled into view, clutching her giraffe. My mother dropped her fake concern and squealed. There's my little angel. Grandma brought presents. Emily stopped, looked up at her, then backed away, hiding behind my legs. I looked down at her, then back at them. I think you should leave. My father tried one more time. But the mortgage? It is not my concern, I finished and shut the door. The next morning, they came back. But this time, they didn't come alone. My Aunt Patty was with them, my mother's older sister, the self-proclaimed family peacekeeper. She was always the one who tried to smooth things over at holidays, the one who sent group emails with "let's all be kind" subject lines whenever drama brewed. And now, she was standing outside my apartment door, knocking gently like she hadn't just teamed up with the people who abandoned me. Natasha, honey, can we just talk for a second? She called through the door. I didn't open it. I understand you're upset, she continued, but your parents are really struggling. Without your help, they might lose the house. I took a deep breath and replied through the door, calmly but firmly. They managed their finances before I started helping. They can do it again. They only took early retirement because they trusted you'd support them, my mother chimed in. I actually laughed out loud. That was their decision. And they didn't ask, they assumed, like they always do. They've cancelled their cruise, Natasha, Aunt Patty said, her voice laced with melodrama. They're selling jewellery. They're scared. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, processing the sheer absurdity of what I was hearing. Do you know what I was scared of 2 weeks ago? I said. Dying on an operating table and leaving my kids orphans. And not one of you was there. I walked away from the door. The knocking continued for another few minutes before finally fading. Later that evening, I got the email. A group message, addressed to our entire extended family, from my father. Subject, our daughter has abandoned us. It was a long, self-pitying essay about how I had cut them off financially without warning, how they had sacrificed everything for me, and how they were now at risk of losing their home because Natasha refuses to help in our time of need. There was no mention of my surgery, no mention of the twins, no mention of why I'd stopped helping, just that I had. But what they didn't count on, people asking questions. Cousin Michael was the first to respond. Uncle Robert, didn't you just buy a new boat last year? Then came Michael's wife. And Aunt Diana, weren't you showing off a new tennis bracelet at Thanksgiving? Others chimed in too. Some messaged me privately, asking what was really going on. Even Aunt Patty called me the next morning. I didn't know about the surgery, she admitted. They told me you were just being dramatic about some minor checkup. If I'd known, I wouldn't have come over yesterday. I thanked her but didn't soften. The damage was done. Meanwhile, Jessica had fully switched sides. She had been at my place nearly every weekend, playing with the twins, cooking, and quietly processing her own disillusionment with our parents. I don't recognise them anymore, she said. Or maybe I do, and I just never saw it before. We sat together on my couch one evening and drafted a response to the group email. It was short, factual, no emotion, just the truth. I recently underwent emergency surgery due to internal bleeding. My parents refused to watch my children during this time, citing prior commitments. I have chosen to focus on my recovery and my children, without the added stress of financial support to others. That is the full story. The reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive. Michael's wife dropped off home-cooked meals. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years offered part-time babysitting help. One distant relative even sent a small care package with colouring books for the twins and tea for me. Most surprisingly, Valerie, the nurse who had stayed with me through the hardest night, connected me with a support group for young widowed parents. Our first meeting was on Zoom. I didn't even need to leave the couch. It was like breathing air for the first time in months. I wasn't the only one. There were others. Mums and dads raising kids alone, grieving, scraping by, rebuilding their lives one broken piece at a time. And for the first time since James died, I didn't feel so alone. Meanwhile, my parents' finances were unraveling. Jessica, trying to understand the full picture, met with them to help review their situation. What she discovered left her speechless. They've been lying to everyone, she told me, half horrified. They took out a second mortgage last year to buy that boat. They thought you'd keep covering the main mortgage, so they stretched themselves way too thin. They're not broke, she clarified. They're just overextended. They could fix everything if they sold the boat and the timeshare, but they didn't want to, because that would mean letting go of their lifestyle. The texts kept coming, the voicemails, shifting in tone every few days, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, sometimes pretending nothing was wrong. But I didn't respond, and with each message I ignored, I felt a little stronger, because while they were still trying to manipulate me into saving their crumbling house of cards, I was building something new. My side business designing memorial websites, originally created as a tribute to James, had started to take off. Members of the support group referred me to others, and suddenly I had clients. Work that felt meaningful. More than that, I was seeing possibility again. Diana, one of the women in the group, was a real estate agent and a fellow widow. We started chatting after a meeting, and she offered to help me explore my options, selling my 2 small apartment and finding something with more space and better schools, even if it meant relocating a bit. Everything was changing. Then, one afternoon, I heard a knock on the door. Again, and this time, when I looked through the peephole, I saw my parents. But something was different. They weren't carrying gift bags or wearing smug expressions. They were holding a binder, a spreadsheet, and they looked defeated. When I opened the door, out of curiosity, not obligation, my dad's voice cracked before he even finished the first sentence. "We need $144,000 to avoid foreclosure." I didn't invite them in right away. I just stared, letting the number settle in my bones. 144,000. I crossed my arms. "Sell the boat." "We'd take a huge loss," he said quickly. "And the timeshare?" "We tried," my mom jumped in. "Market's terrible." But those were meant to be our retirement luxuries. I stepped aside and motioned toward my tiny dining table. "Come in then, let's talk." Because now, I wasn't afraid of them anymore. They sat at my table like guests in someone else's home. Quiet, uneasy, out of place. My father unfolded a printed spreadsheet, running through debt figures like he was pitching a business plan. My mother watched me with cautious eyes, gauging every twitch of my face. "We've cut everything we can," my dad explained. "But without your support, we're underwater. This is our last option." I leaned back in my chair. "And what exactly is it you want from me?" My mother clasped her hands. "A loan, just to get us back on track. Once we stabilize, we can sell the boat and—" "No," I interrupted. Her lips parted, stunned. "No," my father repeated, like he hadn't even considered the possibility. "You want $144,000 from me," I said slowly. "And you still haven't once said, 'How are you feeling, Natasha?' or asked how your grandchildren are doing." They looked at each other. My father tried to recover. "Of course we care. You didn't visit. You didn't call to check on me after surgery. You didn't send a single card for the twins. But now that the mortgage is in trouble and the cruise fund is gone, suddenly I matter again?" He fell silent. Emily wandered into the room holding her sippy cup. She stared at the two strangers sitting at the table, then moved to hide behind my chair. "There's our sweet baby girl," my mum cooed. "Come say hi to Grandma." Emily tightened her grip on my shirt. "They don't know you," I said simply. "You've seen them 3 times since they were born. You've chosen not to be part of their lives." "That's not fair," my dad said sharply. "We've had a lot on our plates." "You were too busy for your grandkids," I replied, "but not too busy for concerts, cruises, and diamond tennis bracelets." My mother's expression cracked. "Without your help, we'll lose everything," she said, her voice low. "I lost everything 6 months ago," I said. "My husband, my future. My kids lost their father, and we survived. You'll survive too." They didn't argue. Not really. They just looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in a long while. But it didn't change anything. 3 months after my surgery, the inevitable happened. They sold the house. Jessica kept me updated. She helped them find a modest 2-bedroom condo in a quiet complex. My father sold the boat at a loss, and the timeshare was finally offloaded. Their new life was a far cry from their former lifestyle, and, frankly, more realistic. "They're blaming you," Jessica told me one afternoon while feeding the twins apple slices at my kitchen table. "They're telling everyone you turned your back on them after promising lifelong support. It's all about how you abandoned them." I sipped my tea and didn't even flinch. Let them talk. The truth doesn't need defending. And the truth did speak. Loud and clear. Cousins, aunts, even distant relatives from my dad's side began reaching out to me. Some just wanted to say they were sorry for believing the lies. Others shared their own stories, how my parents had guilt-tripped them in smaller ways over the years. Everyone had a version, and most had started to see through the act. Meanwhile, my life was growing in ways I hadn't expected. Diana, the real estate agent and fellow widowed mum, helped me sell my cramped apartment and buy a small 3-bedroom house in a neighbourhood with good schools and a backyard. For the first time in their little lives, Ethan and Emily had grass to run on, trees to climb, and space to grow. The mortgage, less than my old rent. The peace, priceless. My side business designing memorial websites had taken off in ways I didn't expect. Word of mouth spread through the support group and beyond. I reduced my client load for graphic design and focused more on this meaningful work, helping people grieve and remember. Olivia still helped with childcare 3 days a week. Jessica visited often. Valerie came by with her kids. I had neighbours who brought casseroles, playdate invites, and real community. And for the first time since James died, I didn't feel hollow. I felt whole. Then, 6 months after my surgery, a letter arrived in the mail. A handwritten letter from my mother. I stared at the envelope for a long time, debating whether to toss it or open it. Curiosity won. Inside was a note unlike anything I'd ever received from her. "I've had time to reflect on my behaviour," she wrote. "Watching you build a life without us has forced me to confront some painful truths. I was jealous of your independence, your strength. I resented that you didn't need me the way I needed my mother. But I see now you did need me, just not in the ways I wanted to be needed. And I failed you." The letter went on, describing how they'd restructured their finances, sold off their luxuries, and even, shockingly, attended family therapy. My father had taken a part-time job at a hardware store. They weren't asking for money, not even for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I showed the letter to Jessica. "They've been talking about writing to you for weeks," she said. "Dad was against it at first, but after his health scare, he's changed." "Health scare?" She nodded. "High blood pressure, chest pains, nothing critical, but it scared him. He's on meds now, following orders for once. I think it really humbled him." I didn't respond to the letter right away. I needed time. Was it real remorse, or a new manipulation tactic? That was the question I wrestled with. One evening, I pulled out an old photo album. James and I, just married. Me in my cap and gown. The twins, pink and new in the hospital bassinet. My parents were in some of the pictures, smiling, playing their parts. I stared at their faces and realised something important. They'd always been acting, but I wasn't. A year after my surgery, I finally agreed to meet them. We chose a quiet cafe near my new home. The twins were with Jessica for the afternoon. I wasn't ready to reintroduce them. This was just a conversation. When they walked in, I barely recognised them. My father looked smaller, physically and emotionally. His confident, blustering air was gone. My mother wore no designer labels, just a cardigan and slacks. Practical, unassuming. We sat. We didn't speak right away. Then my father did something I'd never seen. He cried. "I've been a terrible father," he said, voice cracking. "And an even worse grandfather. I don't expect your forgiveness. But I needed to say it." My mother reached out, not to touch, but to gesture, softly. "We've been going to therapy," she said. "It was Jessica's idea. We resisted at first, but it's helped. A lot." I didn't say much. I didn't offer absolution. But I showed them pictures of the twins. I told them about the new house, the backyard, the life we were building. They listened. For once, they really listened. As we stood to leave, my father asked, "Would it be possible someday to know our grandchildren?" I looked at him, at her, then said carefully, "That depends on your actions, not your words." I didn't promise anything, but I didn't say no. As I walked back to my car, I didn't feel that familiar ache of longing, or the fire of resentment. What I felt was steady, grounded. I was no longer a daughter begging for approval. I was a mother protecting her peace. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough.